A girl in camo is attacked by bullies, mocked, live-streamed, and shoved like she's nothing. But they have no idea she's Special Forces' youngest trainee. In a flash, this quiet, grieving teen moves like a trained soldier, taking down her attackers with moves even she doesn't remember learning. What starts as a cruel high school prank spirals into a deadly manhunt, a buried military secret, and a truth so dangerous it could get her killed. Why can't she remember the training? Why is a powerful arms dealer now hunting her across the city? And when everything explodes into chaos, will she be strong enough to face what's coming? What if the girl they thought they broke was built to take them all down? Your reactions reaffirm something simple yet powerful, that stories still shape us, even in silence. If you believe in the soft endurance of love, truth, and doing what's right, then you're exactly why these stories exist. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk as Keisha Washington approached Lincoln High's imposing brick facade. She pulled her grandfather's military camouflage jacket tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the familiar scent of aged fabric that still lingered after all this time. The oversized jacket swallowed her athletic frame, but she didn't care. It was like wearing a warm hug from the man who had raised her after her parents died. Students streamed past her in designer clothes that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. A group of girls in matching tennis outfits whispered and giggled as she walked by, their eyes fixed on her well-worn jacket. Keisha kept her head high, though her heart ached at their judgment. The jacket meant more to her than their expensive clothes ever could. "Nice jacket," a girl sneered as Keisha reached her locker. "The Army surplus store having a sale?" Keisha didn't respond, focusing instead on working her stubborn locker combination. The metal was cool under her fingers as she remembered her grandfather teaching her how to stay calm under pressure. "Let them talk," he used to say. "Your strength comes from inside, not from what others think of you." The morning passed in a blur of subtle digs and sideways glances. In chemistry, her lab partner accidentally moved her stool farther away. During English, no one picked her for group work until the teacher assigned her to a team. She was used to it by now. Being the scholarship student at Lincoln High meant wearing an invisible target. The cafeteria buzzed with lunchtime chaos when Brandon Kellerman made his grand entrance. He strutted through the double doors in pressed khakis and a cashmere sweater that screamed old money. His perfectly styled hair and confident smirk drew admiring looks from nearly everyone. Everyone except Keisha. "Well, well," Brandon's voice carried across the room as he spotted her sitting alone. "If it isn't G.I. Jane herself." His crew of followers laughed on cue, smartphones already raised to capture whatever drama he had planned. Keisha focused on her sandwich, but her grandfather's training kicked in automatically. She tracked Brandon's movement in her peripheral vision, noting how he positioned himself to command maximum attention. "Seriously, though," Brandon continued, pulling up a chair backwards and sitting far too close. "What's with the jacket? Don't you know this is Lincoln High, not boot camp?" He reached out to finger the worn fabric of her sleeve. Keisha pulled away, her voice quiet but firm. "Don't touch me." "Ooh, she speaks." Brandon's eyes lit up with cruel amusement. "Come on, share with the class. Is this some kind of fashion statement? Or can you just not afford real clothes?" The cafeteria had grown quieter, dozens of phones now recording the scene. Keisha's hands trembled slightly, but she kept them steady under the table. This jacket had seen her grandfather through 2 tours of duty. It had wrapped around her shoulders the night she learned her parents weren't coming home. It deserved better than becoming fodder for Brandon's social media games. "This jacket belonged to my grandfather," she said simply, meeting Brandon's gaze. "He was a better person than you'll ever be." Brandon's smile turned sharp. "Was? Oh right, he's dead too. Just like your parents, right? Must be rough, being all alone." No wonder you're clinging to old clothes like some kind of security blanket." The words hit like physical blows, but Keisha refused to show pain. Her grandfather had taught her better than that. She stood slowly, gathering her things with deliberate calm, while Brandon's crew whooped and called out encouragement to their leader. "Got nothing to say?" Brandon pressed, rising to block her path. "Come on, give us something for the gram. My followers love this kind of content." Keisha looked at the phones surrounding her, at the eager faces hoping to witness her breakdown. She thought of her grandfather, of the quiet strength he'd shown every day of his life, of how he'd taught her that true power wasn't about dominating others, but about standing firm in who you are. "You know what's sad, Brandon?" she said softly. "That you need to tear others down to feel important. My grandfather fought for people like you to have the freedom to be cruel. I hope someday you learn to use that freedom for something better." She stepped around him, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Brandon's face flushed red as his followers lowered their phones, some looking uncomfortable for the first time. "This isn't over," he called after her. "You think you're better than us? I'll show you what happens to people who don't know their place." Keisha kept walking, her grandfather's jacket wrapped around her like armor. She could feel Brandon's eyes burning into her back, could hear him already planning with his crew how to make her pay for embarrassing him. But for the first time since starting at Lincoln High, she felt truly strong. Her grandfather's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "Sometimes the biggest battles are fought with dignity instead of fists." She touched the worn sleeve of his jacket, drawing comfort from the familiar fabric. Brandon Kellerman might have money and social power, but Keisha had something far more valuable. She had her grandfather's strength living on through her. The hallway ahead was empty, but Keisha walked tall. She was an outsider at Lincoln High, and maybe she always would be. But as long as she had this jacket, she carried with her all the love and courage of the man who had taught her to face life's battles with grace. The afternoon sun beat down on the nearly empty school parking lot as Keisha walked toward the bus stop. Most students had already left in their expensive cars or with their private drivers, leaving the asphalt quiet and deserted. She traced her fingers along her grandfather's jacket sleeve, finding comfort in its familiar texture after the cafeteria confrontation. A sharp whistle cut through the air. "Hey, army brat! We're not finished!" Keisha's shoulders tensed as Brandon's voice rang out behind her. She kept walking, quickening her pace slightly, but footsteps approached from multiple directions. Brandon and 3 of his friends emerged from between the parked cars, spreading out to cut off her escape routes. Their phones were already up, recording. "Going live, everyone," Brandon announced to his stream. "Watch what happens when somebody disrespects me at my school." He moved closer, forcing Keisha to back up until she bumped against a silver Mercedes. "What do you say, folks? Should we teach Little Miss Military a lesson about hierarchy?" Comments and likes flooded the live stream as Brandon's followers eagerly awaited the drama. His friends tightened their circle, trapping Keisha against the car. "Look at her hiding in Grandpa's hand-me-downs," one of Brandon's friends sneered. "Bet he got it from some surplus store dumpster." "Nah," another chimed in. "Probably stripped it off a dead body in combat." Keisha's hands curled into fists inside the jacket's deep pockets. "My grandfather was a hero," she said quietly. "He served this country with honor." Brandon leaned in close, his expensive cologne overwhelming. "And where is that hero now?" "Oh, right. Dead like the rest of your family. Maybe if they were better soldiers, they'd still be alive." The words struck deep, but Keisha held herself still. She could feel something stirring in her muscles, an odd tension she didn't understand. Her body seemed to hum with potential energy. "What's wrong?" Brandon pressed. "No smart comebacks now?" "Not so brave without an audience?" He grabbed the collar of her jacket, pushing her harder against the car. This ratty thing probably belongs in the trash, just like... A sharp ripping sound cut through the air as Brandon yanked on the fabric. Keisha heard stitches tear, felt the beloved jacket give way under his grip. Something inside her snapped. The world seemed to slow down. Her body moved before her mind could process what was happening. Her hands shot up, breaking Brandon's hold with a precise strike to his wrists. She stepped forward, using his own momentum to spin him off balance. It felt like watching someone else move through her body, someone trained, someone dangerous. Brandon stumbled backward, his phone clattering to the pavement. What the... His eyes widened in shock and fear. Keisha stood perfectly balanced, her grandfather's torn jacket hanging loose around her shoulders. Her breathing was steady, her stance grounded. Muscle memory she never knew she had positioned her hands in a defensive guard. "She's crazy!" one of Brandon's friends shouted, backing away. Their phones wavered between filming and lowering, uncertain whether to keep recording or run. Brandon recovered his composure, anger replacing his surprise. "You're dead, Washington!" He lunged forward, swinging wildly. Keisha's body responded with fluid precision. She slipped past his punch, redirecting his force with movements that felt as natural as breathing. Where had she learned this? Images flashed through her mind. Hours spent in grief counseling after her parents' death, playing what she thought were focus exercises and meditation games. But they hadn't been games at all, had they? Brandon attacked again, and again her body knew exactly how to respond. She moved like water, every defensive technique perfect, despite never having consciously learned them. His friends watched in stunned silence as their leader failed to land a single blow. "Fight back!" Brandon screamed, frustration making him sloppy. "Stop dancing and fight!" But Keisha didn't need to attack. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. True strength isn't about hurting others, it's about standing your ground while staying true to yourself. She maintained her defensive stance, letting Brandon tire himself out. Each move felt like remembering rather than learning, like waking up from a long dream. Her muscles sang with forgotten knowledge, her mind racing to understand what was happening. Brandon finally stopped, panting and disheveled. His carefully styled hair hung in his eyes, his expensive sweater stained with sweat. "What are you?" he gasped. Keisha looked down at her hands, wondering the same thing. They felt different now. Capable, dangerous. She touched the torn sleeve of her grandfather's jacket, grief mixing with this strange new awareness of herself. "I'm exactly who I've always been," she said softly. "Someone you shouldn't have underestimated." She could see the live stream comments still scrolling on Brandon's fallen phone, his followers witnessing his complete humiliation. His friends shifted uncomfortably, no longer looking so eager to participate in his bullying. Brandon's face twisted with rage and embarrassment. "This isn't over," he spat. "You think you're special because you know some moves. My father owns half this town. I'll make your life hell." But his threats sounded hollow now. Something fundamental had changed. Keisha felt it in her bones, in the way her body hummed with dormant training finally awakened. The muscle memory was just the beginning. There were other memories stirring now, questions about her parents' death, about the counseling she'd received, about everything she thought she knew. She stood straight, letting Brandon see the steel in her eyes. "Touch me or this jacket again," she said calmly, "and you'll learn exactly what else I can do." The parking lot fell silent, except for the soft ping of cooling engines and the distant sound of traffic. Brandon and his friends stared at her like they were seeing her for the first time. Not as a target, but as something dangerous and unknown. Brandon's face contorted with rage. He reached behind his back and pulled out a small pocket knife, the blade glinting in the afternoon sun. "Let's see how tough you really are," he snarled. Time seemed to slow down again. Keisha's body moved with a fluid grace that felt both foreign and familiar. As Brandon lunged forward with the knife, her hands were already in motion. She stepped inside his reach, grabbed his wrist with one hand while the other struck a precise point on his forearm. The knife clattered to the ground as Brandon's fingers went numb. Before he could react, Keisha had already twisted his arm behind his back, using his own momentum to drive him face first into the Mercedes. His cheek pressed against the cold metal as she held him immobile with seemingly no effort. "Get her!" Brandon shouted to his friends. The three boys hesitated for just a moment before charging forward. Keisha's body responded with devastating efficiency. She released Brandon with a push that sent him stumbling and turned to meet the attack. The first boy threw a wild haymaker. Keisha slipped under it like water flowing around a rock. Her elbow found his solar plexus with surgical precision, dropping him to his knees, gasping for air. The second attacker grabbed for her jacket, but she was already moving. Her hip turned, her hands gripped his sleeve, and suddenly he was flying through the air. He landed hard on his back, the impact driving the breath from his lungs. The third boy backed away, hands raised. "I don't want any—" His words cut off as the second attacker's phone hit him in the back of the head. He stumbled forward, right into Keisha's perfectly timed sweep. His feet left the ground, and he landed beside his friend with a heavy thud. Brandon had recovered enough to try another rush. This time, Keisha met him with a lightning-fast combination that seemed to materialize from some hidden part of her muscle memory. Block, strike, redirect, sweep, her body knew exactly what to do. Brandon's feet went out from under him, and he crashed down next to his fallen friends. The entire exchange had taken less than 30 seconds. Keisha stood in the center of the parking lot, surrounded by 4 groaning boys who had just learned a harsh lesson about underestimating their target. Her breathing was steady, her stance perfectly balanced. She felt like she was waking up from a dream, except the dream had given her abilities she couldn't explain. Phones appeared from everywhere. Students who had been heading to their cars stopped to record the aftermath. Someone had picked up Brandon's dropped phone, which was still live streaming. Comments scrolled past in a blur of shocked reactions and explosive emojis. "Did anyone else see that? Who is she? That was some John Wick level stuff. Playing on repeat forever." The fallen boys struggled to their feet. Pride hurt worse than their bodies. Brandon's face was a mask of humiliation and fury as he realized his attempted bullying had been broadcast live to his entire following. "My father will hear about this." He spat, trying to salvage some dignity. "You're going to regret." Slow, deliberate applause cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see a distinguished-looking man in a crisp military uniform standing at the edge of the parking lot. Colonel James Morrison's silver temples caught the sunlight as he walked toward them, his bearing radiating quiet authority. His eyes never left Keisha as he approached, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Excellent form," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent parking lot. "Your parents would be proud." Keisha felt her heart skip a beat. You knew my parents?" The colonel nodded slowly. "Very well. And I've been watching over you since they died, making sure you received the proper training, even if you didn't know that's what it was." Memories flickered through Keisha's mind. The grief counseling sessions that always left her physically tired, the meditation exercises that focused on muscle control, the visualization games that now seemed more like combat scenarios. All of it had been carefully disguised, planting seeds of knowledge deep in her muscle memory. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because you're their daughter," Colonel Morrison answered simply. "And because there are people who would prefer that certain military programs remain buried with their creators." His gaze swept over Brandon and his friends, who were trying to edge away unnoticed. "I suggest you boys think very carefully about the story you tell about what happened here today. Some truths are classified for a reason. Brandon opened his mouth to protest, but something in the colonel's eyes made him reconsider. He grabbed his phone from the student who had picked it up and hurried away, his friends close behind. Other students began to disperse as well, but their phones were still out, still recording. Keisha knew the footage would be everywhere by tonight. There would be questions she couldn't answer, attention she didn't want. "What happens now?" she asked the colonel. "Now," he said, "we talk about who you really are, and why those combat instincts were planted in your muscle memory. There's a lot you need to know about your parents, about their work, and about why they were killed." Keisha touched the torn sleeve of her grandfather's jacket, feeling the weight of secrets and hidden truths settling around her shoulders. The simple life she had known was over, torn away like the fabric under her fingers. But something new had awakened in its place, something powerful, dangerous, and undeniably part of who she truly was. Colonel Morrison gestured toward his parked car across the street. "Let's talk somewhere more private." His tone was gentle but carried unmistakable authority. Keisha glanced around at the remaining students still hovering with their phones out. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled her grandfather's torn jacket closer around her shoulders. "Okay," she said quietly. They walked to a sleek black SUV with government plates. Morrison opened the back door, revealing a small mobile office setup, complete with a secure laptop and various communications equipment. He motioned for Keisha to sit inside while he took the seat opposite her. "First, let me properly introduce myself. I'm Colonel James Morrison, United States Army Special Forces. I served with both your parents for over 15 years. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a worn photograph, handling it with reverence. "This is your mother, Captain Diana Washington." Keisha's breath caught in her throat. The woman in the photo stood proud in her dress uniform, medals gleaming on her chest. She had Keisha's same dark eyes and determined set to her jaw. I barely remember her," Keisha whispered, touching the photo with trembling fingers. "Your mother was a legend in the Special Forces community," Morrison continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Captain Washington wasn't just any soldier. She was one of the most skilled operatives I've ever known. She specialized in deep cover operations and had an uncanny ability to spot patterns others missed." Keisha stared at her mother's face, trying to reconcile this powerful military figure with the few hazy memories she had of bedtime stories and warm hugs. "What happened to her? Everyone just told me it was an accident overseas." Morrison's face darkened. "It wasn't an accident. Your mother uncovered something during her last mission, a breach in our highest levels of security. She was tracking a man named Kozlov, who had been systematically infiltrating military training programs." He paused, watching Keisha carefully. She knew the risks of pursuing the investigation, but that was who she was, someone who would sacrifice everything to protect others. Tears welled in Keisha's eyes as she continued to study the photograph. "And my father? He was Special Forces too. They met during advanced training. Both of them were exceptional soldiers, but your mother?" Morrison shook his head in admiration. "Diana had something special. The same thing I just saw you display in that parking lot." Keisha looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "That fluid movement, the instant tactical analysis, the perfectly executed combat techniques. Those aren't things you just pick up naturally. They're coded into your DNA, enhanced by very specific training programs." Morrison leaned forward. "Your mother helped design those programs. She believed that certain combat instincts could be passed down genetically and activated through specialized conditioning." Keisha's mind raced back through years of supposed therapy sessions and counseling. "The grief counseling after my grandfather died, that wasn't really counseling, was it?" Morrison shook his head. Number It was a carefully designed training program, disguised to slowly activate abilities you inherited from your mother. We couldn't tell you the truth. It would have put you in danger. But we needed to prepare you, just in case. In case of what? Keisha demanded, her voice rising slightly. In case the same people who killed your parents ever came looking for you. Morrison's words landed like heavy stones in the quiet car. Your mother left messages for you, dozens of them, hidden in secure servers. She knew she might not survive to tell you everything herself. She wanted to make sure you would understand your heritage when the time came. Keisha's hands clenched in her lap. So everything I thought I knew about my life, it's all been a lie. Not a lie, Morrison corrected gently. A necessary protection. Your grandfather was part of it too. He was Special Forces before he retired. That jacket you're wearing? He gave it to you because he knew it would help you feel connected to your military heritage, even if you didn't understand why. Keisha touched the torn sleeve of her grandfather's jacket, feeling the worn fabric beneath her fingers with new understanding. Every time she'd put it on, she'd felt stronger, more focused. Now she knew why. There's more you need to know. Morrison continued, but right now I want you to understand something important. He reached across and took her hand. Your mother was the bravest person I've ever known. She loved you more than anything in this world. Everything she did, everything we've done since, was to protect you and prepare you for this moment. Tears rolled down Keisha's cheeks as 16 years of questions finally began finding answers. The constant moving when she was young, the strange therapy sessions, the way her grandfather had insisted on teaching her meditation and focus exercises. It all made sense now. I see so much of her in you, Morrison said softly. The way you handled yourself today, that was pure Diana Washington. She would have been so proud. Keisha wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. I wish I could talk to her. There's so much I want to ask. Morrison's expression shifted slightly, and he reached back into his briefcase. Actually, he said, pulling out a small device that looked like a secure phone. You can. Your mother made sure of that too. Morrison held the secure device carefully, his weathered hands treating it like something precious. What I'm about to show you. It's going to be difficult to process. But you need to understand the full scope of what's been happening. He activated the device, and a holographic display flickered to life between them. Video footage began playing, showing a familiar summer camp setting where Keisha had attended what she thought were grief counseling sessions. This is from 6 years ago, your first summer after your grandfather passed. Morrison explained, his voice gentle but firm. Keisha leaned forward, watching herself at age 10, walking into what she remembered as a counselor's office. But as the footage continued, the scene shifted dramatically. The office walls slid away, revealing a state-of-the-art training facility. Her younger self moved through complex combat scenarios with startling precision. I don't remember any of this, Keisha whispered, her hands shaking as she watched herself execute perfect tactical maneuvers. You weren't meant to, Morrison replied. The program used advanced psychological conditioning to suppress the conscious memories while preserving the muscle memory and tactical instincts. What you thought were grief counseling sessions were actually intensive training with some of our most elite operatives. The footage changed to show different summers, different facilities. In each one, Keisha demonstrated increasingly advanced combat skills, strategic thinking, and tactical awareness. Every summer camp, every weekend retreat, every special therapy session, they were all part of the program. Keisha's mind reeled as she tried to reconcile her memories with what she was seeing. But I remember talking about my feelings, about losing Grandpa. I remember arts and crafts and swimming, and those memories were carefully constructed. Morrison interrupted gently. The program used a combination of advanced psychological techniques and targeted memory suppression. We needed you to develop these skills without consciously knowing you had them. It was the only way to keep you safe. Anger flared in Keisha's chest. Safe? You messed with my mind. You made me forget whole chunks of my life. Her voice cracked with emotion. How is that keeping me safe? Morrison switched off the holographic display and leaned forward, his expression grave. The people who killed your parents are still out there. They've been systematically targeting military families, especially those with children who might have inherited certain genetic markers. Your mother's research proved that combat instincts could be passed down, enhanced through specific training protocols. You're living proof of that theory. Keisha looked down at her hands, remembering how they had moved with such deadly precision in the parking lot. So I was some kind of experiment? No, Morrison said firmly. You were, the future your mother envisioned. She knew these abilities existed within you, but she also knew you'd be targeted for them. The program was designed to give you the skills to protect yourself while keeping you under the radar. More footage played, showing Keisha training alongside masked operatives, learning advanced combat techniques, mastering weapons systems she had no conscious memory of ever touching. We selected you not just because of your genetic potential, but because you showed remarkable adaptability even as a child. Your mind could handle the compartmentalization required for the program. All those headaches I used to get after camp, Keisha murmured, memories shifting into new context. Side effects of the memory suppression, Morrison confirmed. Your brain was working to process the training while maintaining the constructed memories. It wasn't easy, but you handled it better than any other candidate we've ever had in the program. Keisha stood up suddenly, needing to move in the confined space of the SUV. How many others? How many other kids did you do this to? 12, Morrison answered. All children of Special Forces operators, all with the genetic markers we were looking for. But none of them showed your level of ability. You have your mother's gift, the perfect combination of inherited traits and adaptability. So what happens now? Keisha demanded. Now that I know the truth, now that the training has surfaced, or whatever you want to call it? Morrison's expression grew more serious. That's your choice. We can reinforce the memory suppression, let you go back to… No. Keisha cut him off sharply. No more messing with my memories. I want the truth. All of it. Are you sure? Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your life will never be the same. Keisha touched her grandfather's jacket again, feeling the weight of her heritage in its worn fabric. My life hasn't been what I thought it was for years. At least now I'll know why. She sat back down, fixing Morrison with a determined stare. Tell me everything. About my mum's research, about the program, about why my parents really died. Morrison nodded slowly, reaching into his briefcase one more time. Your mother left this for you. She recorded it the week before she died. She knew this day might come. He handed Keisha a small data chip. But before you watch it, you need to understand what you're really up against. The people who killed your parents, they're not just criminals. They're part of a larger organization that's been infiltrating military programs for decades. Keisha held the data chip tightly, feeling its edges press into her palm. Her entire world had shifted in the space of an hour, but somehow she felt more grounded than ever before. The confusion and anger were still there, but underneath them was something else, a sense of purpose, of finally understanding who she really was. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Show me what I need to know. Viktor Kozlov sat in his dimly lit office, his scarred fingers drumming against the polished mahogany desk as he watched the viral video for the fourth time. The security feed from the school parking lot showed every detail of the confrontation with crystal clarity. His cold grey eyes narrowed as he studied the girl's movements, frame by frame. "Stop!" he commanded, his Russian accent thick with tension. The video froze on Keisha mid-strike. "There, that counter-move, it's unmistakable." His assistant, a former intelligence analyst named Marcus, leaned closer to the screen. "Sir, the Meridian Protocol," Kozlov explained, his voice hard with recognition. "A classified combat system developed for deep cover operatives. I spent 2 years trying to infiltrate that program before they caught on to me." He traced the frozen image of Keisha's stance with one finger. The foot placement, the angle of attack, its signature technique that only comes from their training program. Marcus pulled up additional footage from different angles, showing Keisha's fluid takedown of all 4 attackers. "She's just a teenager, though. How would she—" "They've expanded the program." Kozlov cut him off, standing to pace the room. "When I was trying to infiltrate, they were only working with active duty personnel. But this—" he gestured at the screen. "This is something new. They're training children now, hiding their operators in plain sight." He moved to the wall of monitors, displaying various security feeds from around the world. "Run facial recognition. I want everything you can find on this girl. School records, family history, all of it." Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Name is Keisha Washington, age 16. Both parents deceased. Wait." He paused, looking closer at the data. "Her mother was Captain Diana Washington." Kozlov's face darkened at the name. "Diana Washington." He spat the words like poison. "She was the one who discovered my true identity 12 years ago. The one who almost exposed my entire network." He turned back to the main screen, studying Keisha's face. "So this is her daughter. They've been training her right under our noses." "Sir, if she has access to classified combat knowledge, she's a security breach." Kozlov finished, his voice cold and clinical. A walking archive of military secrets that could expose not just the program, but everyone who's ever tried to infiltrate it. He pulled up a secure communication channel on his private terminal. "If she starts remembering her training, starts making connections, what are your orders?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. Kozlov began typing rapid commands into the system. "Activate all local assets. I want surveillance on her 24/7. Track every movement, every contact." He switched to a different channel. "And get me Dimitri's team. If she's been through the program, we'll need professionals to handle this." Multiple windows opened on the main screen, showing various mercenary teams acknowledging the alert. Kozlov watched as his network of killers and criminals began mobilizing, all focused on one teenage girl who had just become the most dangerous threat to his organization. "Sir," Marcus spoke up, studying new data flowing across his screen. "There's movement around her location. Military personnel, very well hidden, but our systems caught them. Someone's protecting her." "Of course they are," Kozlov growled. "They wouldn't leave their precious experiment unguarded." He pulled up satellite imagery of the area around Lincoln High School. "But they can't watch her every second. Everyone has blind spots, moments of vulnerability." A cruel smile crossed his face. "And we only need one moment." He opened his private safe and removed a worn file folder, spreading photographs across his desk. They showed younger versions of himself standing with military contractors, all marked with red X's. "I've spent 12 years eliminating everyone who could connect me to my past attempts to infiltrate their programs. Everyone who might remember seeing my face or hearing my name." He picked up a photo of Diana Washington, her face stern in her military portrait. "I thought I'd cleaned up all the loose ends when I dealt with her parents. But now—" Marcus studied the surveillance feeds, showing Keisha leaving the school parking lot with Colonel Morrison. "The girl seems to be with high-level military personnel now. Taking her out won't be easy." No, Kozlov agreed. It won't. But we have no choice. If she starts remembering her training, starts asking questions about her parents' death. He closed the folder with a sharp snap. She'll eventually lead them right to us. Everything we've built could come crashing down because of one teenage girl. He activated a secure line to his most elite tactical team. Dmitri, I have a priority target. Maximum security protocols. The target has advanced combat training and military protection. He paused, listening to the response. Yes, whatever resources you need, but this needs to be handled quickly and quietly. We can't risk her remembering anything more about her training or starting to investigate her parents' deaths. Kozlov ended the call and turned back to the wall of monitors, watching as his various teams began moving into position around Lincoln High School and Keisha's known locations. Keep all surveillance teams at maximum distance, he ordered Marcus. If she's been through the program, she'll be trained to spot watchers. We can't risk tipping our hand until we're ready to move. And if we can't get to her directly? Marcus asked. Then we create a situation that draws her out. Kozlov replied, his tactical mind already formulating plans. Everyone has pressure points, family, friends, connections that can be exploited. He studied Keisha's school photo on the main screen. Find them. Map out every person she talks to, every place she goes. I want options. The office hummed with activity as Kozlov's criminal network mobilized, all focused on eliminating the unexpected threat that had suddenly emerged. On the main screen, the video of Keisha's fight played one final time, showing the deadly grace of her movements that had just marked her for death. The first explosion shattered the safe house windows, sending glass spraying across the living room. Keisha instinctively dropped to the floor as Colonel Morrison grabbed her arm and pulled her towards the back hallway. "Stay low," he commanded, his military training evident in every precise movement. The sound of boots on gravel outside signaled the approach of multiple attackers. "We've got maybe 30 seconds before they breach." Keisha's heart hammered in her chest, but her body moved with surprising steadiness. "Who are they?" "Professional hit squad," Morrison answered, leading her to what looked like a solid wall. He pressed a hidden panel, revealing a narrow escape tunnel. "Someone with serious resources wants you eliminated." Another explosion rocked the building as they slipped into the passage. Behind them, the sounds of combat erupted as Morrison's security team engaged the attackers. The colonel pulled out his phone, typing rapidly as they moved. "I've got 4 operators I trust completely moving to intercept us at the rally point," he explained, guiding her through the dark tunnel. "But we're looking at least 20 heavily armed hostiles out there." They emerged into a maintenance tunnel beneath the city streets. Morrison's flashlight beam revealed rusty pipes and crumbling concrete walls covered in decades of grime. The colonel moved with purpose, clearly familiar with these hidden pathways. "Your parents were investigating a weapons trafficking operation," he explained as they jogged through the darkness. They uncovered evidence of military contractors selling classified tech to terrorist cells. But before they could expose the network, they were... He paused, choosing his words carefully. They were silenced. Gunfire echoed through the tunnels behind them, followed by shouted commands in Russian. Morrison cursed under his breath and picked up the pace. "The program you were part of, it wasn't just about training," he continued, leading her up a maintenance ladder. "It was about creating a new generation of operators who could move invisibly through civilian society, kids who could blend in completely until activated." They emerged in an abandoned factory, moonlight streaming through broken windows. The vast space was filled with rusted machinery and fallen ceiling beams. Morrison guided her toward a partially collapsed wall that offered both cover and a view of the surrounding area. "How many others like me are there?" Keisha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 12, Morrison replied, checking his weapons. "All orphans of fallen operators, all given the same modified training protocol. He met her eyes. But you're the only one who started remembering. Movement caught their attention. Shadows shifting against shadows across the factory floor. Morrison pushed Keisha lower behind their cover as red laser sights swept the darkness. "Colonel James Morrison?" A heavily accented voice called out. "You're only making this harder on yourself. Give us the girl, and you can walk away." Morrison responded by firing 3 precise shots, forcing their attackers to scatter for cover. "Victor Kozlov!" He spat the name like a curse. "Should have known you'd crawl out of whatever hole you've been hiding in." Keisha's combat instincts, training she was only now beginning to understand, screamed warnings as multiple teams moved to flank their position. "We're being surrounded," she whispered. Morrison nodded grimly. "They're herding us, trying to force us toward the loading docks." He checked his phone. "My team's still 8 minutes out. We need to move." They crawled through the debris as gunfire erupted around them, bullets sparking off metal and concrete. Morrison's return fire was measured and precise, each shot forcing their attackers to pause and seek new cover. "Your mother was the one who first identified Kozlov," Morrison explained between exchanges of gunfire. "He was trying to infiltrate our training programs, steal our methods. When she exposed him, he disappeared. But not before eliminating anyone who could connect him to his past." They reached a section of collapsed roof that created a natural ramp to the second level. Morrison covered their ascent as Keisha scrambled up the unstable surface, her body moving with an efficiency that still felt foreign to her. "So he's trying to kill me because I might remember seeing him during my training?" Keisha asked as they crouched behind a rusted conveyor belt. "Partly," Morrison replied, "but mostly because you're living proof that the program exists. Your combat skills alone could expose classified military protocols. And if you start investigating your parents' deaths..." More mercenaries were flooding into the building now. Through gaps in the floor, Keisha could see them moving in practiced formations, their equipment marking them as professional killers. "They're not just random hired guns," Morrison observed grimly. "These are former Special Operations personnel. Kozlov's built himself a private army." A new barrage of gunfire forced them further back. Morrison's phone buzzed, a message from his approaching team. "We've got 3 minutes to hold out," he said, "but they're going to make their big push before reinforcements arrive." As if on cue, multiple flashbangs detonated around them. Morrison shielded Keisha with his body as the mercenaries launched their assault. The air filled with the sharp crack of gunfire and the metallic ping of bullets striking steel. "Remember your training," Morrison shouted over the chaos. "Let your body move on instinct." And suddenly, Keisha's muscles were responding with fluid precision. She rolled to better cover, retrieved Morrison's spare magazine when he ran dry, and even managed to disarm an attacker who got too close, all without conscious thought. "Good girl," Morrison said with grim approval. The program might have been morally questionable, but the training was excellent. They could hear Kozlov shouting orders to his men in Russian, coordinating a final push to overwhelm their position. But distant gunfire suggested Morrison's team had finally arrived, engaging the mercenaries from behind. "Hold on," Morrison told her, checking his ammunition. "This is about to get very interesting." The pursuit through Detroit's industrial wasteland intensified as Keisha and Morrison navigated the maze of abandoned buildings. Decades of neglect had transformed this once thriving manufacturing district into a concrete graveyard. Broken windows gaped like hollow eyes, and rusted metal groaned in the wind. Morrison led them through a narrow alley between 2 warehouses, his breathing labored but controlled. "They're trying to funnel us east," he whispered, pressing against a graffiti-covered wall, using standard tactical containment patterns. Keisha's newly awakened combat awareness picked up on the subtle signs, the way Kozlov's men maintained specific distances from each other, how they used overlapping fields of fire to cover their advance. like a net closing in, she said. Exactly. Morrison checked around the corner, then quickly pulled back as bullets chipped away at the brick. We need to break their perimeter, get somewhere they can't predict. They sprinted across an open loading area to reach a massive warehouse. The building's metal skin had partly peeled away, revealing its skeletal framework underneath. Morrison worked quickly to force open a rusted side door, while Keisha kept watch. Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of decay. Moonlight filtered through holes in the roof, casting strange shadows across abandoned assembly lines and toppled storage racks. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, accompanied by the occasional crunch of broken glass. This whole section is structurally compromised, Morrison warned as they moved deeper into the building. Watch your step and stay close to the support columns. A burst of gunfire forced them to separate, diving behind different pieces of machinery. The sound reverberated through the vast space, making it impossible to pinpoint the shooters' locations. "Colonel!" Keisha called out, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "I see them," Morrison responded. "Second-level catwalk, 9 o'clock position." Keisha's eyes found the threat. 3 mercenaries moving along the elevated walkway, their tactical gear making them look like modern-day gargoyles against the broken skylights. More gunfire erupted from the ground level, forcing her deeper into cover. Morrison's return fire was precise, dropping one of the catwalk attackers. But the firefight was drawing more of Kozlov's men into the building. The colonel motioned for Keisha to move toward a partially collapsed office structure while he provided covering fire. A tremendous groan filled the air, metal stress reaching its breaking point. The gunfire had weakened already compromised support beams. Morrison recognized the danger first. "Keisha, run!" he shouted, abandoning his position to race toward her. The roof section above them gave way with a thunderous crash. Morrison reached Keisha just as tons of steel and concrete came down, shoving her clear of the collapse zone. But he couldn't get himself completely clear in time. When the dust settled, Morrison was pinned beneath a fallen beam, blood seeping from a wound in his side where jagged metal had caught him. Keisha scrambled to his side, her hands shaking as she assessed the damage. "How bad?" she asked, though the growing crimson stain answered her question. "Bad enough." Morrison grimaced, trying to shift his weight, but stopping when fresh pain flashed across his face. "Listen carefully, Keisha. There's something you need to know." More gunfire peppered their position, forcing Keisha to duck lower. Morrison grabbed her arm with surprising strength, pulling her closer. "Your grandfather. He knew this day might come. There's a storage unit in his name at the secure lock facility on Michigan Avenue, Unit 317. He pressed a key into her hand, its metal warm from being carried close to his body. "Everything you need to know about your parents, about the program, it's all there." "I'm not leaving you," Keisha insisted, but Morrison shook his head. "You have to. I'll only slow you down, and we both know what Kozlov will do if he catches you." He pulled out his backup pistol and handed it to her. "Remember your training. Trust your instincts. They're more reliable than you know." The sound of boots on metal announced more of Kozlov's men entering the warehouse. Morrison used his remaining strength to push Keisha away. "Go! Now!" he ordered, raising his primary weapon to cover her retreat. Keisha's body moved before her mind could process the decision, combat training taking over as she sprinted toward the back of the warehouse. Behind her, Morrison's gunfire provided covering fire, drawing attention away from her escape route. She found a partially hidden loading dock door, its rusted track protesting as she forced it open just enough to slip through. The last thing she heard was Morrison's voice, strong despite his injuries, shouting challenges at their pursuers in Russian. Outside, the industrial wasteland stretched before her like an urban jungle. Somewhere in the darkness, Kozlov's men were still searching. But now she was alone, with only her mysterious training and a storage unit key to guide her next move. The weight of Morrison's sacrifice pressed down on her as heavily as the pistol in her hand. She could hear her grandfather's voice in her head from one of their last conversations. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't standing your ground. It's knowing when to fall back and regroup. Taking a deep breath, Keisha oriented herself toward Michigan Avenue. She had a key, a destination, and a mission. Whatever answers awaited her in Storage Unit 317, she would honor Morrison's sacrifice by staying alive long enough to find them. Moving silently through the shadows, Keisha began making her way through the industrial maze. Each step took her further from the wounded colonel who had risked everything to protect her, and closer to the truth about her family's legacy. The secure lock facility loomed before Keisha, its weathered brick facade illuminated by flickering security lights. At 3 a.m, the storage complex was deserted, which suited her needs perfectly. Her hands trembled slightly as she punched in the entry code Morrison had given her, and the security gate creaked open. Unit 317 was located in the back corner of the facility, partially hidden by shadows. Keisha's footsteps echoed off the concrete as she approached, each number on the storage units counting up to her destination. When she reached 317, she paused, staring at the padlock that had secured her family's secrets for so many years. The key Morrison had given her fit perfectly. The lock clicked open, and Keisha lifted the rolling door, wincing at its metallic protest. Inside, the unit was smaller than she expected, but meticulously organized. Military footlockers lined one wall, while filing cabinets occupied the other. In the center stood a simple desk with a laptop and what looked like an old video camera setup. Keisha's throat tightened as she recognized her grandfather's handwriting on the labels. He had maintained this unit all these years, keeping these secrets safe until she was ready. She started with the nearest footlocker, its green paint faded, but still bearing her mother's name stenciled on the side. Captain D. Washington. Inside, she found her mother's dress uniform, carefully preserved in plastic. Medals and commendations she'd never known about filled a wooden box. Each one told a story of heroism and sacrifice that had been hidden from her. But it was the manila envelope marked classified that caught her attention. The mission files inside detailed her mother's final operation. Captain Diana Washington had been investigating security breaches within the Special Forces training program. Her reports outlined a pattern of infiltration attempts, all leading back to one name, Viktor Kozlov. "Oh my God," Keisha whispered, reading through the evidence her mother had collected. Kozlov hadn't just been a corrupt contractor. He'd been systematically trying to steal classified training techniques and identify program participants for years. Her hands shaking, Keisha moved to the desk and opened the laptop. It powered on immediately, preloaded with a video player. The first file was labeled simply, "For Keisha, Day 1." Her mother's face filled the screen, and Keisha's breath caught in her throat. Captain Diana Washington sat straight-backed in her uniform, but her eyes were soft with love as she looked into the camera. "My beautiful girl," Diana began. "If you're watching this, then things have gone very wrong, and I'm no longer there to protect you. I'm recording these messages because there are things you need to know, about who you are, about who we are, and about why everything happened the way it did." Tears rolled down Keisha's cheeks as she watched message after message. Her mother had recorded dozens of them, each one meant to explain another piece of the truth she'd been too young to understand. "We discovered Kozlov had compromised several training facilities," Diana explained in one video. "He was selling our techniques to foreign militaries, exposing our operatives. When we got close to proving it, he disappeared, but not before threatening everyone involved in the investigation." Another video showed Diana looking more worried, her uniform replaced by civilian clothes. "We're taking precautions, but Kozlov has resources we didn't anticipate. If anything happens to your father and me, it won't be an accident, baby, no matter what anyone tells you." Keisha's hands clenched into fists, The car crash that had killed her parents. She remembered the official report calling it a tragic accident. But her mother's files told a different story. Brake lines cut, guardrails compromised, a professional hit made to look like a terrible coincidence. The final video was different from the others. Diana sat closer to the camera, her voice urgent but filled with determination. "Keisha, my brave girl, I need you to understand something. Everything we did, every secret we kept, was to protect not just you, but all the children in the program. Kozlov doesn't just want revenge, he wants to expose and exploit these young people with incredible abilities. We couldn't let that happen." Her mother's eyes seemed to look directly into Keisha's soul as she continued. "You have these abilities too, baby. They're part of your heritage, part of who you are. I know it's a lot to process finding out this way, but you come from a long line of warriors who stood up against people like Kozlov, who protected others no matter the cost." Diana wiped away a tear, her composure cracking for just a moment. "I wish more than anything I could be there to help you through this, to train you myself, to watch you grow into the amazing woman I know you'll become. But know this, everything you need is already inside you. Trust yourself, trust your training, and most importantly, trust your heart." The video ended, freezing on her mother's face. Keisha sat in silence, processing everything she'd learned. Her parents hadn't abandoned her. They'd died protecting her, and countless others from a monster who was still out there, still hunting. She turned back to the files, reading them with new understanding. Her mother's investigation had been thorough, documenting Kozlov's network, his methods, his weaknesses. Diana Washington had known she might not survive to bring him to justice, so she'd left behind everything her daughter would need to finish what she'd started. The truth settled over Keisha like her grandfather's old jacket, heavy with responsibility, but somehow perfectly fitted to her shoulders. She wasn't just some teenager who'd stumbled into this situation. She was Captain Diana Washington's daughter, trained and prepared for this moment, even if she hadn't known it. In the dim light of the storage unit, surrounded by her family's legacy of service and sacrifice, Keisha finally understood who she truly was. And more importantly, she understood what she had to do next. Keisha sat cross-legged on the storage unit's floor, surrounded by her mother's files. Her head throbbed as memories started breaking through, not just glimpses now, but full scenes playing out in vivid detail. The grief counseling sessions at Camp Pine Grove took on new meaning as the psychological barriers crumbled. She remembered the hand-to-hand combat training, disguised as team-building exercises, the weapons familiarization masked as arts and crafts, the tactical planning hidden within nature walks. Each memory surfaced with crystal clarity, accompanied by knowledge she hadn't known she possessed. Her fingers traced a list of names in one of her mother's files, other participants in the program, young people like her, chosen for their potential and trained in secret. The page was marked with red X's, dates, and brief notes: car accident, home invasion, drowning, too many to be coincidence. "He's hunting them," Keisha whispered, her voice tight with anger. "All these deaths. Kozlov's been eliminating everyone who went through the program." She found a recent intelligence report showing surveillance photos of Kozlov's waterfront compound. The layout was familiar. She'd studied similar facilities during her hidden training. Her mind automatically identified entry points, security vulnerabilities, and tactical approaches. The knowledge felt natural now, like remembering how to ride a bike. A burner phone Morrison had given her earlier buzzed with an incoming text. The message contained only an address and 3 words: "They have Morrison." Keisha's hands clenched into fists. Morrison was being held at Kozlov's compound, probably being interrogated about the program and its participants. How long before he broke? How many more young lives would be lost? She closed her eyes, remembering her mother's final video message. "Everything we did was to protect not just you, but all the children in the program. The weight of that responsibility settled over her. These weren't just random names in a file. They were kids like her, carrying abilities they didn't even know they had. Standing up, Keisha moved through a series of combat stances, testing her newly awakened muscle memory. Her body responded with fluid precision, each movement perfectly calibrated. The training was there, waiting to be used. But was she ready to risk everything? She thought of her parents, who had died protecting these secrets, of her grandfather, who had guarded them until his last breath, of Morrison, who had watched over her all these years. They had all sacrificed so much to keep others safe. Walking to the footlocker, Keisha pulled out her mother's tactical gear. The black uniform was old but well maintained. As she changed into it, more memories surfaced. Weapons drills, infiltration techniques, emergency protocols. Everything she needed had been carefully planted in her mind, waiting for this moment. "I understand now, Mom," she said softly, checking her equipment. "Why you did it, why it was worth dying for." The tactical vest felt familiar against her chest as she secured the straps. Each piece of gear triggered another cascade of memories. How to use it, when to use it, why it mattered. The muscle memory extended beyond just combat now, encompassing years of specialized training. Keisha studied the compound's layout one final time, her enhanced tactical awareness identifying 3 potential infiltration routes. She could see the whole operation playing out in her mind: timing, contingencies, escape routes. The plan formed with practiced ease, drawing on skills she'd possessed all along. But more importantly, she understood what this choice meant. Going after Morrison wasn't just about rescue. It was about standing up against everything Kozlov represented, about protecting others who didn't know they needed protection. They trained us to be guardians, she realized, remembering Morrison's words about the program's purpose. Not just soldiers, protectors. Her mother's final message echoed in her thoughts. Trust yourself. Trust your training. Trust your heart. The path forward was clear now. She couldn't hide from who she was or what she'd been prepared to do. Keisha packed her mother's files into a waterproof bag, evidence that could expose Kozlov's entire operation. The compound's security would be formidable, but she had surprise on her side. They would be expecting the scared teenager from the school parking lot, not the fully awakened operative she'd become. As she prepared to leave, Keisha paused at the desk one last time. Her mother's face smiled from the frozen video frame, proud and determined. "I won't let them hurt anyone else," she promised. "What you and Dad died protecting, I'll protect it too." The storage unit door rolled down with a final clang. Keisha Washington, daughter of heroes, product of the program, and now fully aware of her capabilities, stepped into the pre-dawn darkness. The time for running was over. She had a mission to complete and others to protect. Morrison was waiting, and somewhere in the city, dozens of young people just like her were living normal lives, unaware of the threats gathering around them. They deserved the chance her parents never had, to live without fear, to choose their own paths. Her training hummed through her body like electricity, every sense heightened and ready. She could feel the full weight of her abilities now, no longer hidden behind artificial barriers. The scared, isolated teenager from Lincoln High was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone her parents had always known she could become. From her vantage point atop an abandoned grain elevator, Keisha studied Kozlov's waterfront compound through high-powered binoculars. The pre-dawn light cast long shadows across the facility, highlighting its defensive features. 3 layers of security fencing crowned with razor wire surrounded a cluster of industrial buildings. Armed guards patrolled in precise patterns, their movements revealing their professional military training. She mapped their rotations in her mind, recognizing the standard 2-man patrol configurations. Her newly accessible training provided instant analysis. These weren't ordinary security contractors. Their movements and equipment marked them as former Special Operations personnel, likely from Eastern European military units. 8-minute intervals between perimeter sweeps. She muttered, jotting notes in a small waterproof notebook. 2 sniper positions on the roof. Guard changes every 4 hours. The tactical information flowed naturally now, her mind processing security details with practiced ease. The compound's main building was a converted warehouse, its windows reinforced with steel shutters. Security cameras covered every approach, but Keisha's enhanced perception spotted the system's weakness. All feeds appeared to run through a single control room on the 2nd floor. The building's northwest corner showed signs of recent construction, with fresh concrete and new electrical conduits. "That's where they're holding Morrison," she concluded, noting how the guards paid special attention to that section during their rounds. Probably a reinforced detention area. Her training supplied the standard layout for such facilities. Morrison would be in a windowless room, likely underground to muffle any sounds. Movement at the main gate caught her attention. A black SUV with diplomatic plates rolled through the checkpoint. Keisha zoomed in on the vehicle's occupants, recognizing Kozlov in the back seat. His scarred face was unmistakable from the photos in her mother's files. He stepped out of the car carrying a sleek metal briefcase, his movements precise and controlled. "Expecting company, aren't you?" Keisha whispered, watching him scan the perimeter before entering the building. Her enhanced tactical awareness picked up subtle signs. The guards were too alert, their patterns too perfect. This wasn't just security, it was a carefully laid trap. She shifted position, moving to study the compound from another angle. The facility's power supply came from a commercial transformer station near the water. Emergency generators were positioned behind the main building, their fuel tanks exposed. Her mind automatically catalogued potential entry points: drainage culverts, maintenance access panels, ventilation shafts. Taking out a tablet computer, Keisha pulled up satellite imagery of the area. The compound's location on the waterfront offered both advantages and challenges. The river provided a potential infiltration route, but it also meant limited escape options if things went wrong. She noted the tide schedules, water temperatures, and patrol boat patterns. Her training had prepared her for exactly this type of analysis. What once seemed like simple summer camp activities now revealed their true purpose, teaching her to break down complex tactical problems into manageable elements. Each challenge had a solution if you understood the underlying patterns. "They're expecting a frontal assault," she realized, reviewing the security layout. Something desperate and emotional. The trap was designed for someone acting on instinct rather than training. Exactly what they'd expect from a teenage girl trying to rescue her mentor. But Keisha wasn't that girl anymore. The psychological barriers that had hidden her training were gone, leaving her with full access to years of specialized instruction. She understood now why the program had chosen this approach. It allowed them to create operatives who could appear completely ordinary until their abilities were needed. Opening her mother's files, she studied the technical specifications for the security systems commonly used in such facilities. The knowledge surfaced immediately: bypass codes, hardware vulnerabilities, electromagnetic weaknesses. Her fingers moved across the tablet screen, mapping out approach vectors and timing sequences. A slight movement caught her eye, a guard checking his watch too frequently. "They're waiting for something," she murmured, noting similar tension in other personnel. Probably monitoring all approaches except... Her mind raced ahead, seeing the possibility. They would be watching for her to come in quiet and low, like her training would suggest. So she would do the opposite. Keisha began preparing her equipment with methodical precision. Each piece had been carefully chosen from her mother's storage unit, selected for specific purposes rather than general utility. The gear felt familiar in her hands, muscle memory guiding each check and adjustment. She studied the guard rotations for another hour, confirming her observations. Their patterns were too perfect, too predictable, designed to create obvious gaps that would tempt an infiltrator. But her enhanced perception spotted the hidden overlaps, the carefully concealed secondary positions that would trap anyone who took the bait. "Nice setup," she acknowledged, appreciating the tactical design even as she planned to exploit it. "But you're expecting someone who thinks like a soldier." The program had taught her to think beyond standard military doctrine, to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. The sun was rising now, bringing increased activity to the waterfront. Dock workers arrived at neighboring facilities, creating background noise and movement that would help mask her approach. Keisha checked her watch, noting the timing of shift changes and delivery schedules. Her plan took shape with crystal clarity. Not just a rescue attempt, but a precisely coordinated operation that would turn Kozlov's own security against him. Every element of her training would come into play, from the combat skills that had surfaced in the school parking lot to the strategic thinking that had been carefully embedded in her mind. "Hold on, Morrison," she whispered, making her final preparations. "I'm coming, just not the way they expect." The trap was set, but Keisha Washington was no longer the prey they thought she was. She was something else entirely, a fully awakened operative with the training of America's most elite soldiers and the determination of a daughter seeking justice. The compound waited below, its defenses seemingly impenetrable. But Keisha saw it differently now, through eyes trained to find weakness in any fortress. Her enhanced capabilities revealed not just what was there, but what could be done with it. The time for planning was nearly complete. Soon, Kozlov would learn exactly what the program had created. The midnight sky hung dark and heavy over Detroit's waterfront as Keisha made her final approach to Kozlov's compound. She moved like a shadow through the industrial landscape, her grandfather's military jacket now modified with tactical gear from her mother's storage cache. The first layer of security fell silently. Keisha bypassed the perimeter sensors using an electromagnetic pulse device, creating a narrow window of opportunity. Her movements were fluid and precise, each step placed with calculated care as she slipped through the disabled section of fence. 2 guards approached on their regular patrol route. Keisha's enhanced awareness tracked their movements perfectly. 8 steps until they would spot her position. Instead of hiding, she triggered a small device that replicated radio interference in their communications. As expected, both men turned to adjust their earpieces. In that brief moment of distraction, Keisha was already moving. Her body responded with practiced efficiency, muscle memory taking over as she neutralized both guards without a sound. The techniques felt natural now, her suppressed training fully accessible. She secured their weapons and communication devices, quickly accessing their radio frequencies. "Sector 4, clear," she transmitted using one guard's voice pattern synthesizer, another tool from her mother's equipment cache. The response came immediately, confirming her timing was perfect. She had 12 minutes before the next radio check. The compound's main security hub pulsed with electronic activity. Keisha connected a small tablet to an external power junction, executing a series of commands that her training recognized instinctively. The building's advanced security system had one critical weakness. It was designed to detect intrusion attempts from outside the network. "Time to phone home," she whispered, initiating a protocol that made the system believe it was receiving updates from its own servers. Security cameras began cycling through pre-recorded footage, while automated doors received phantom authorization codes. A group of 4 guards rushed past her hiding spot, responding to a false alarm she had triggered on the opposite side of the compound. Keisha's tactical analysis confirmed her theory. Kozlov's men were expecting a direct assault, not the subtle infiltration techniques taught by the program. Moving through the facility's maintenance areas, Keisha encountered her first real challenge. A reinforced door protected the access route to the detention level. The lock required both keycard and biometric authentication. Her training provided the solution before she even finished analyzing the problem. She retrieved a specialized device from her gear, pressing it against the door's control panel. The unit began replicating the facility's internal security protocols, creating a ghost credential that existed for exactly 30 seconds. Combined with lifted biometric data from the guards she had neutralized, it was enough to fool the system. The door opened silently, revealing a sterile corridor that led to the underground detention area. Keisha's enhanced senses detected subtle changes in air pressure and temperature, signs of recent construction and active climate control. Morrison had to be close. 2 more guards stood watch at a security checkpoint. Keisha accessed the building's environmental controls through her tablet, gradually increasing the carbon dioxide levels in their section. Within minutes, both men were fighting to stay awake, their training unable to overcome basic human physiology. She moved past their unconscious forms without breaking stride. Morrison's cell was exactly where she had predicted, northwest corner, subterranean level. The door's security system was standalone, isolated from the main network. But Keisha's training had prepared her for this too. She attached a specialized decryption unit to the control panel, letting it cycle through possibilities at superhuman speed. Through the cell's observation window, she could see Morrison. He was restrained but alert, his military bearing evident even in captivity. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized her, the only indication of surprise he allowed himself to show. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Keisha entered the cell, moving quickly to release Morrison's restraints. "Nice of you to drop by," he said quietly, rubbing his wrists as he stood. "We need to move." Keisha responded, her tactical awareness already mapping their exit route. "Kozlov's expecting company, but not for another 30 minutes. Morrison nodded, falling into step behind her as they moved through the facility. Every corridor and junction had been accounted for in her planning. Security systems remained blind to their presence, while guard patrols continued responding to phantom alerts across the compound. They encountered no resistance until reaching the ground level. A sudden burst of radio traffic indicated that someone had finally noticed the discrepancies in the security feeds. Keisha's training kicked in automatically, adjusting their route to compensate for the increased threat level. "You've got full access now, don't you?" Morrison observed as they navigated through the building's service areas. "The program's conditioning has completely broken down. Every lesson, every technique," Keisha confirmed, her movements demonstrating the truth of her words. She had become exactly what the program intended, a fully trained operative hidden behind an ordinary exterior, ready to activate when needed. Alarms blared through the compound as Keisha and Morrison rounded the final corner. They found themselves face to face with Viktor Kozlov, who stood blocking their path to freedom. His cold grey eyes locked onto Keisha, a cruel smile playing across his scarred face. "The prodigy child," Kozlov said, his accent thick with mockery. "Finally we meet properly." He held a combat stance that matched Keisha's own training, confirming his military background. Keisha pushed Morrison behind her, assuming a defensive position. "You murdered my parents," she said, her voice steady despite the rage burning inside her. Kozlov circled slowly, studying her movements. "Your mother was particularly troublesome. She discovered my initial infiltration attempt, threatened to expose everything. Your father tried to protect her, of course. Such loyalty, it made them predictable." He lunged forward with frightening speed, but Keisha was ready. She deflected his first strike and countered with a combination that drove him back several steps. The clash of combat echoed through the corridor as they engaged in a brutal exchange of strikes and blocks. "You're not the first program graduate I've eliminated," Kozlov taunted between exchanges. There were others, younger ones who thought they could hide. I found them all." He landed a powerful blow that sent Keisha stumbling backward. Their training was impressive, but ultimately futile. Keisha recovered quickly, her own attacks becoming more precise as muscle memory and tactical analysis worked in perfect harmony. She drove her elbow into his ribs, following with a sweep that nearly took him off his feet. But Kozlov's experience showed he absorbed the impacts and responded with devastating counterstrikes. The fight moved through the corridor, each combatant seeking tactical advantage. Kozlov's superior strength was matched by Keisha's speed and agility. Their exchange of blows demonstrated the highest level of combat training, a lethal dance of precisely calculated violence. Suddenly, Kozlov broke away and drew a pistol, aiming it at Morrison's head. "Enough games!" he snarled. "Surrender now, or watch him die like your parents did." Keisha froze, her hands raising slowly in apparent submission. "Don't hurt him," she said, carefully removing her weapons and letting them clatter to the floor. "I'll do what you want." Kozlov's smile widened as he watched her submit. Finally, wisdom prevails. On your knees, hands behind your head. As Keisha complied, her right hand brushed against a small device concealed in her jacket collar. She had positioned explosive charges throughout the compound during her infiltration, waiting for exactly this moment. "You know what my mother taught me through those video messages?" Keisha asked, her finger finding the detonator. "Always have a backup plan." The explosion rocked the entire structure. Chunks of ceiling crashed down as support beams buckled. Kozlov fired wildly as he was caught in the cascade of debris, his shots going wide as tons of concrete and steel buried him. Keisha grabbed Morrison and pulled him through the chaos, navigating the collapsing corridors with perfect precision. Her planning had created this exact escape route, timed to the second. Behind them, Kozlov's screams of rage were silenced by the continuing collapse of his compound. They emerged into the cool night air as secondary explosions consumed the facility. Keisha supported Morrison as they moved quickly toward their extraction point, leaving behind the buried remains of her parents' killer and his criminal empire. 1 week after the compound's destruction, Keisha sat in Colonel Morrison's office at the Detroit Military Command Center, watching news reports scroll across multiple screens. Her grandfather's jacket, now carefully repaired, hung comfortably on her shoulders as she leaned forward to read the headlines. "Interpol dismantles global arms network," one headline declared. Another showed footage of raids happening across 3 continents. Over 200 arrests made in coordinated international operation. Morrison, his arm still in a sling but recovering well, gestured to the screens with pride. The intel recovered from Kozlov's computers was a goldmine. His entire operation is being dismantled piece by piece, and it all started with your viral video catching their attention. Keisha shook her head, still amazed by the chain of events. All because Brandon Kellerman wanted social media fame. She watched footage of weapons caches being seized in various countries. "I never imagined standing up to a bully would lead to this." "Speaking of Kellerman," Morrison said, pulling up a different screen. "Take a look at this." The monitor showed Brandon's latest social media post, a fundraising campaign for military families who had lost loved ones in service. The video featured Brandon speaking directly to camera, humility replacing his former arrogance. "After witnessing true strength and sacrifice firsthand," Brandon's recorded voice said, "I realized how shallow and harmful my previous behavior was. My family's resources should support those who actually protect and serve others." Keisha felt a complex mix of emotions watching her former tormentor's transformation. He really changed after everything that happened. "People can surprise you," Morrison said. "He's already raised over $100,000 for veteran support programs." Turning away from the screens, Morrison handed Keisha an official-looking folder. "Speaking of surprises, these are your new training schedules, if you're still interested in continuing the program." Keisha opened the folder, scanning the detailed training regimens and educational opportunities. Unlike the hidden program of her past, these were open and clearly explained. "No more memory suppression this time." Morrison shook his head. "No more secrets. You'll train openly, building on the foundation you already have. Your mother would be proud of how you're carrying forward her legacy while making it your own." Keisha traced her fingers over the schedule. "I want to protect others the way my parents protected this country, but I want to do it my way. In the open, where I can inspire others to find their own strength." "You already have," Morrison said, pulling up one final screen showing dozens of messages from young people inspired by her story. "Your stand against both schoolyard bullying and international criminals has resonated with people. You've shown them that real power comes from protecting others, not intimidating them." Keisha stood, squaring her shoulders under her grandfather's jacket. The garment no longer felt like just a memorial to loss. It had become a symbol of her heritage and her future. She was no longer the grieving, powerless orphan trying to hide from the world. She had emerged as someone who could protect others and honor her family's legacy while forging her own path. "When do we start?" she asked, her voice filled with quiet confidence. Morrison smiled, seeing in her the same strength he had recognized in her mother years ago. "We already have. This is just the beginning." Through the office windows, the afternoon sun illuminated the training grounds where new recruits were preparing for their own journeys of transformation. Keisha knew her place was out there with them, helping to create a future where strength meant protection, not power over others. Thank you for watching. If this one reached you, consider subscribing. I'll be back tomorrow with more meaning, more humanity.